Hey guys, welcome to another episode of KLINGSPOR's Tech Talk. I'm Nick DeMars.
I'm Nikolai Patterson. I oversee the Diamond Blade product line here at KLINGSPOR. Today we'll look at why having the right bond and why making that right selection can be crucial when making the right recommendation to your customers. A lot of people do not recognize that the bond that actually holds the diamond in place is just as important, if not more important, than the actual diamond.
So you've got some pretty good information coming up here for us. We're going to take a look in a moment at what we call our aggregate map. But before we do that, I want to mention if you do have questions and you'd like to send them in to us, go ahead and email us at techtalk@klingspor.com. And we will be very prompt to reply to your email with answers to your questions. Maybe we can elaborate a little bit and go into some of this stuff that we're going to talk about today based on the area that we're getting the question from. But so we're going to talk a little bit about aggregate. What is it and what does this map mean?
So aggregate is just a makeup of different materials. Most of the time it's going to be your sand and your gravel. And when you're talking about an aggregate map, those different colors on the map are going to deal with how hard or how soft that makeup is of those materials.
So I assume when you're talking about these aggregates, you're also considering which particular diamond blade you're going to use. So how does this knowledge about aggregates affect your choices when it comes to the makeup of the diamond blade?
If you look at an aggregate map, you'll see that it has soft aggregate, medium soft, medium, medium hard, and hard. And they're all labeled by color. Whenever you're looking at an aggregate map, your softer aggregates, and on the aggregate map it says that you need a softer bond. You need a 300 series, and we'll get into those numerical values of what those mean in accordance to bond a little bit later. But all that means is when you look at this map with KLINGSPOR, you can choose 3 different good, better, best options.
And I think one thing that's important to mention as well is some states import their aggregates from another area. For instance, I know that Florida imports aggregates from the Mississippi River and so on and so forth. So it's important, you know, if you're dealing with the question about which blade to use or what aggregate you have in your area, to ask some questions and try to get a good understanding of where that aggregate comes from.
Yeah, if there's any type of shortage, which in current times, supply chain can become an issue. I know that here recently people have been getting their aggregate from a lot of different places. So.
Okay, so this affects a lot the choice you're going to make as far as your diamond blades go. And we see here that there are different series of diamond blades that we have for specific aggregates, specific areas, so on and so forth. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we have our 300 series, our 600 series, and our 900 series. All that is your soft, medium, and hard aggregates. Your 300 series is going to be for your softer aggregates. It does have a little bit less diamond concentration, about 18 to 21%. Your 600 series is your medium bond, and it has anywhere from 21 to 24% diamond concentration. And then your 900 series is going to have your hardest bond, and it's going to be for your hardest aggregate with the most diamond concentration.
So I assume the different diamond concentrations and primarily the bond is going to have a lot of effect on the cutting performance.
Having a softer bond or a harder bond is not always the best thing for the application. That's why going to the aggregate map is very important. If you have a hard aggregate, you're going to want a hard bond that can cut through that. But you don't want too hard of a bond because then it won't be able to expose a new diamond matrix. So really you have to find that sweet spot of where you can have the most longevity with the most cutting performance.
You know, in a way it's kind of similar to bonded abrasives. You know, we talked a lot here about bonded abrasives, and the same basic principles seem to apply. You've got a harder bond, yeah, it's going to last longer, but it's going to cut slower. You've got a softer bond, it's going to cut a lot faster, but you're going to wear the blade out faster.
Yep, absolutely. All that's doing is exposing that new diamond matrix. That's what they call it, because there is diamond and bond all over your segment. So once that first layer of diamond's gone, there's going to be a new layer of diamond that takes its place. I know that that's how it is with our blades. Some of our competitors, they have, diamond just sprinkled on bond. So once that diamond is gone, you're done. You're just rubbing bond against whatever you're cutting. Whereas with ours, you're constantly exposing new diamonds, sharpening it, if you will.
And kind of like sandpaper, it's got different diamond sizes as well. I know I ran into that some in my past life. I was doing a lot of work with ceramic tile. We used continuous rim blades, and at times we would have to cut glass, in which case we would go to a harder bond and a smaller diamond. So the bond plays a very, very important part in this. And the way you're talking, the bond is just as important as the diamond is. How does that affect how these blades cut as far as cutting and grinding goes?
Yeah, so in theory, a diamond blade doesn't really cut. It's gonna grind. And what happens is you need the correct bond, like we were talking about earlier. If your bond's too soft, or if your abrasive material is too abrasive, your diamond will fall out. You will have no longevity. You'll be trading out blades every day. That's how you'll know that your bond's too soft. If your bond's too hard, you're not going to have any exposed diamond. You're just going to be cutting with bond. You're honestly better off having a too soft of a bond than a too hard of a bond, because a too hard of a bond won't cut at all. Ideally, you want the bond just right, where your grain's exposed but held firmly in place by the bond.
And I guess so that's why it's important, we talked about the aggregate map and the different aggregates in different areas of the country. That's why that's so important, because you're talking about your bonds being softer, harder, medium, whatever the case may be, based on that aggregate.
Yeah.
That's a very important concept. This could cost a person a lot of money. If you get the wrong blade for the application, you're going to be trading out blades left and right.
In the field, I've run into a lot of people will use, whatever they can get their hands on for the right price, whereas they're having to change a blade a day. Whereas if they just listened or made the right recommendation, it would save them a lot of time changing blades, along with the money aspect as well. Because one blade could last you a week versus having to use a box of blades a week.
Okay, so let me ask you this question then. Out of all the parts that make up a diamond blade, we've got the segments and the bonds and the diamonds and so on and so forth. What would you say is the most important part?
The most important part is going to be your bond, absolutely. This is the part that has to do with the performance in your aggregate. The diamonds, the concentration of diamonds, not really that important, but the bond is what is exposing that new diamond so that the old diamond can fall out. It's super, super, super important that the bond is the perfect one for the application. It's just like we were talking about with bonded products. If your bond's too hard or too soft, it's just not going to work as well. Just keep it in mind whenever you're thinking about making a recommendation or using a certain diamond blade, that if a company has a percentage of diamonds on their packaging, that is not as important as them labeling their bond.
I know, because the general school of thought would seem to be that the more diamonds, the better it's going to cut.
Whenever you start dealing with the more diamonds, you can do, like you said with glass, you can honestly start chipping a lot. That's why you said you use a smaller diamond or less diamond and more bond. That way you can grind instead of chipping. So there's a lot more that goes into it. It's honestly not as complex as people like to think. I think that people like to overthink it. I think that if you just look at your aggregate map, you know that, so for instance, here in North Carolina, where you're going to be dealing with your medium to medium hard aggregates, where we're at probably medium. And then you can go from there as to whether you want to get a 600 series or a 900 series. And that's all in the aggregate map. The aggregate map will tell you, your soft aggregates are your limestone, your sandstone, whereas your hard aggregates are going to be your quartz and flint rock and things like that.
Bond is going to play a key part in every bit of this. And it's interesting too, because I've heard great success stories with both the 600 and 900 series here in North Carolina.
Yep, absolutely. And you know, out in the field, we'll have people, you know, that'll say, well, the 600 series usually will cut better than the 900 series. And in all honesty, it's probably true. The 900 series won't cut as quick. But as far as longevity goes, that bond's so hard that it's going to last a lot longer. So if a lot of people don't care about how long it lasts, they want to cut fast. So your 600 series is obviously going to give you a little bit of both worlds as far as cut to service life. But your 300 series is going to cut the fastest.
So let me mention again, folks, if you have any questions as far as you know, what type of bond you need based on your aggregate, contact Nikolai at techtalk@klingspor.com. Send us in that question. He'll jump on there. He'll answer the question. I think that's about all we have for today. But before we leave, I want to leave a cliffhanger here. Did you know that we have a diamond blade that'll cut just about any material?
That is right. We do. The all-cut rescue blade, I've done a lot of field testing with it at fire departments, things like that, but it's called the all-cut rescue, but it's not just for fire departments. It can be used at utility companies, municipalities. It will cut rubber, plastic, glass, wood, steel, Connex wall, almost anything you need to cut. So that's why fire departments love to use it. It'll cut it if they have it there, it'll cut it. But outside of the box, it's not just for fire and rescue.
So I'm going to assume that at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to highlight that blade a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Through being out in the field and things like that, getting video, getting pictures, things like that to bring back and help the reps and everybody know exactly what the blade does. So.
Cool. So a little bit of cliffhanger there for you. One more time, if you have questions, techtalk@klingspor.com. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Nick DeMars.
And I'm Nikolai Patterson.